My own son believed I was oblivious when he dropped a suspicious substance into my drink during our holiday meal, but my eyes missed nothing. As he turned away, I seamlessly swapped our glasses, transforming his act of treachery into a self-laid trap. What unfolded for him moments later left me breathless. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The doorbell didn't just ring, it sounded in a series of short, insistent jabs. That sliced through the tranquil atmosphere of my den. I lowered my book and checked the mantel clock. 8:15 p.m. on a Thursday, an unusual time for visitors. Opening the door, I found Ethan on my doorstep, his form huddled against the biting November chill. Sarah stood just behind him, her arms folded tightly, her breath forming small clouds in the frosty air. Before a word could pass my lips, my son brushed by me and entered the house. "We have to talk." His tone held a sharpness I hadn't heard since his rebellious teenage years. Sarah came in after him, shutting the door with a decisive thud. She scanned my den with an appraiser's eye, her gaze pausing on the cherry wood bookcases I had built myself, the plank floors I had painstakingly installed. "Ethan, what is all this about?" I retreated toward my leather armchair, feeling suddenly like an intruder in my own sanctuary. He paced restlessly before the hearth, his professional attire rumpled, his normally immaculate hair in disarray. "It's about this place, Dad. It's about you hoarding a small fortune while we're barely staying." "Afloat." The accusation felt like a punch to the gut. "Afloat? But you have a great career. A lovely home, lovely home." Sarah advanced, her voice cutting. "Arthur, we're squeezed into a 3-bedroom condo with 2 children. Chloe is using the den as her bedroom, for crying out loud." Ethan spun around, his face reddened with emotion. "Dad, we need a larger home for our family now, not when you're gone. The kids are getting older, and we can't just wait on an inheritance while you cling to this property." I held onto the back of my chair. This house was the culmination of 40 years of my life. Every single nail, every piece of molding, every precisely cut joint was my own effort. "Ethan, son, this house is my life's work, my memories. When I'm gone, it will all be yours. Everything I have. That's not enough." His voice trembled with desperation. "We need the capital today. Sell it, Dad. Move into one of those assisted living places. Use the proceeds to support your family." Sarah drew nearer, her voice shifting to a gentle, manipulative tone. "Arthur, just be practical. We need the funds now. The children deserve room to thrive, opportunities we can't afford while living hand to mouth." "Practical?" A fire ignited in my chest. "Practical? I poured my soul into this place for 4 decades. Every board, every room. This is my legacy." Ethan's face twisted in frustration. "Your legacy is useless if it's not helping your family when we need it. You're being selfish, Dad. Incredibly selfish." The charge stung deeply. I had labored on construction jobs through scorching summers and freezing winters. I saved every spare dollar. I constructed this home as a future for him. And now he was calling me selfish for wanting to live out my years in it. Leave. The word emerged quietly, but it was imbued with the full force of my conviction. "Both of you, get out of my home." Ethan's eyes widened, then hardened into resentment. "Fine, but this conversation isn't over, Dad. We'll find another way." They left without another word. The slam of the front door vibrated through the house, shaking the photos on the walls. Through the window, I saw their car reverse down the driveway, its tail lights vanishing into the November gloom. I was left standing alone in my den, my legs weak, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The comforting walls now felt alien, no longer a home, but a fortress under siege. An hour and a half later, I remained frozen in the spot where Ethan had left me. The profound silence was broken only by the familiar creaks of the house settling. My wool sweater felt damp against my back with a cold sweat. I finally collapsed into my armchair, the leather sighing under my weight. My hands refused to stop shaking. In all my life, I never dreamed my own son would address me with such disdain, would look at me with such pure contempt. The den felt altered. I surveyed the crown molding I had so carefully cut and installed. The hardwood floors I had sanded to a perfect smoothness. Every surface was a testament to calloused hands and a sore back, to Helen bringing me lemonade on long weekend projects. I rose and went to the fireplace, tracing the lines of the mantel I'd carved from a single piece of cherry wood. I remember mixing mortar in the dead of winter, I murmured to the empty room, laying each brick while it threatened to freeze solid. Our wedding picture was in its usual spot, Helen beaming in her blue dress. I took the silver frame, her image blurring as tears welled in my eyes. Helen would have known how to handle this. She always did. I moved to her favorite chair by the window and sat, still clutching the photo. Helen had a unique ability to see, past people's anger to the fear underneath. Family is everything, Arthur. She often said when people lash out, it's usually because they're scared. Perhaps Ethan was scared, and Sarah too, residing in a cramped condo with 2 kids, seeing their peers purchase larger homes while they struggled. That kind of pressure could drive people to desperation. The thought propelled me upstairs to our old bedroom. Inside the closet behind Helen's dresses I could never bring myself to part with, I opened the small wall safe. The heavy metal door swung open silently. $12,000 in crisp stacks, money I had accumulated over decades. Putting away 20 here, 100 there, every bill was something I had foregone, some small luxury I had denied myself. A new pickup when the old one was still running, fine. A simple sandwich for dinner instead of a restaurant meal. I lifted the cash, feeling its physical weight. $12,000 wasn't the house equity Ethan demanded, but it was substantial help. It could be a down payment, give them a real boost. It was love in a tangible form. The bills felt sharp between my fingers as I recounted them. In the morning, I would call Ethan. I would apologize for my anger and present him with this gift. Perhaps then he would see I wasn't his adversary. I was his father, offering help in the only way I could. I placed the money back in the safe, but didn't lock it. Tomorrow would be for reconciliation. Tomorrow my son would be reminded that family was what truly mattered. The following morning, I was at my kitchen table with a hot cup of coffee and the previous day's paper beside me. Sunlight streamed through the frost-laced window, creating familiar patterns on the maple surface I had built and installed 20 years prior. I had practiced my speech a dozen times while preparing my oatmeal, simple, direct, and affectionate, an apology and an offer combined with a hope for healing. My hand was slightly unsteady as I dialed Ethan's number. The phone rang twice before his voice came on the line, clipped and impatient. "What is it, Dad?" Not the warmest of greetings, but I forged ahead. "Son, I want to help. I've been thinking about our conversation, and you're right. Family has to come first. I have $12,000 in cash for you. It's yours." A long silence hung in the air. Then Ethan's voice erupted from the phone, so loud I had to pull it away from my ear. "12,000? Are you actually serious right now? Is this supposed to be some kind of sick joke?" I was taken aback, confused by his rage. "It's all the liquid cash I have, son. I thought it would help with a down payment." "A down payment?" His laugh was harsh and mocking. "Dad, do you have any concept of current real estate prices? We can't make a respectable down payment with that paltry sum." My coffee was getting cold as I tightened my grip on the phone. "Ethan, please. It's my entire life savings. It's offered. With love." Love? His voice was seething with fury. "You greedy old fool. You're sitting on a property worth hundreds of thousands, and you're tossing us scraps as if we're beggars. This is demeaning." Fire flared in my chest. I worked for 40 years to build this home. Every single dollar of those savings came from working overtime and skipping meals. And what good is it doing us, locked away in your precious house? We're struggling, Dad. My children are growing up in a crowded condo, while you hoard your wealth like some fairy tale dragon. "Hoard?" I was shouting now, on my feet by the kitchen counter. "I offered you everything I have. Everything you have is this house. Sell it, Dad. Stop being so selfish and help your actual living family instead of obsessing over a ghost. The word struck me like a physical assault. Helen. He had dragged Helen into this, dismissing her memory as if it were meaningless, as if our 40-year marriage was merely an obstacle to his inheritance. Face the facts, old man. You're going to die alone in that house, and we'll just sell it then anyway. Why not help us now when it actually matters? The line went dead. I stood holding the receiver, the dial tone a dull buzz in my ear. My hand trembled as I replaced the phone. The kitchen felt suffocating, the walls closing in. Outside, a neighbor's festive lights blinked merrily, a stark contrast to the darkness that had consumed my morning. The coffee was now completely cold. I stared at it, trying to process what had just transpired. My son, the boy I had taught to swing a hammer, who had helped me install the bathroom tiles at age 12, had just shown me his true colors. He didn't want my assistance. He wanted my house, and he was ready to obliterate our relationship to obtain it. An hour after the call, I remained in my kitchen chair, gazing at the phone as if it might ring again. The coffee was stone cold, a thin layer forming on top. My hands had finally ceased their trembling. I pushed myself up and walked slowly to the den. My legs were unsteady, as if I had been ill for days. The morning sun angled through the windows I had installed myself, illuminating dust particles dancing in the light. On the mantelpiece was a framed picture of Ethan at age 8, smiling a gap-toothed grin. He had been helping me install the kitchen cabinets that weekend, passing me screws and steadying the boards. Such small hands back then, so eager to help his dad build something permanent. I picked up the frame, my thumb stroking the glass. 35 years ago, he'd broken his arm falling from his bike. I had held him in this very chair, while Helen called the doctor, feeling his small body tremble with sobs against my chest. What happened to that boy? College tuition, $50,000. I had worked double shifts for 3 straight years to pay for it. His first car upon graduation, $10,000. The wedding Sarah insisted upon, $20,000. More than Helen and I had spent in our first year of marriage combined, and this morning he had called me a greedy old fool. I set the photo back on the mantel, my jaw tight. The memories flooded in, uninvited and sharp. Teaching him to drive in the vacant church parking lot, helping him move into his first apartment, co-signing the loan for his second car because his credit wasn't strong enough. Every sacrifice, every extra hour worked, every vacation Helen and I skipped so we could help our son build his future. And for what? So he could stand in my den and demand I sell the home I had built with my own 2 hands. I walked to the window, looking out at my front yard. Mrs. Gable across the street was already putting up her Christmas decorations, humming to herself as she worked. Normal people, living normal lives, not having their hearts torn out by ungrateful offspring. The anger felt good, a clean, sharp sensation that cut through the pain like a scalpel. I squared my shoulders, feeling something solidify within me, something hard and resolute. I had raised Ethan, supported him, loved him, without condition for 42 years, and he had thrown it all back at me for money. Called me greedy for wanting to live in the house I had spent a lifetime creating. That's it, no more. I looked around my den with a fresh perspective, not as a future asset to be liquidated, but as my own space, the crown molding I had cut by hand, the hardwood floors I had sanded to a perfect finish, the built-in shelves where Helen's books remained exactly as she had left them. This was all mine. And if Ethan wanted nothing to do with me unless I was providing him with cash, then he could have just that. Nothing. My chest felt lighter than it had all morning. The decision settled comfortably in my gut, solid and certain. No more calls, no more offers of help, no more being disappointed when my son revealed exactly who he had become. I glanced toward the garage where boxes of holiday decorations were stored. Maybe some physical labor would help dissipate this restless energy. Tomorrow, I'd get out the lights and make the house look festive. Not for family, I didn't seem to have any of that left, but for myself, because I could, because it was my house. The next morning, I was awake before sunrise and couldn't fall back asleep. By 9 a.m., I had finished my breakfast and was standing in my garage, pulling dusty cardboard boxes off the shelves. Holiday decor, 1995. Read Helen's neat script on the closest one. Perhaps decorating the house will lift my spirits. The thought felt empty as I formed it, but I needed to occupy my hands with something that didn't involve thinking about ungrateful children or cruel accusations. The first box held strings of icicle lights in a tangled mess that would take an hour to unravel. I laid them out on my workbench, systematically checking each bulb for damage or burnout. The repetitive task was soothing, a problem I could actually fix. By 10:30, I had retrieved my aluminum ladder and set it against the side of the house. At 65, climbing up to hang lights along the eaves was more strenuous than it once was. My knees complained with every step, and I had to pause twice to catch my breath. But the physical exertion felt good, tangible. Each clip I fastened to the gutter, each section of lights I tested and hung, represented real progress. Unlike trying to salvage a relationship with someone who only saw me as a financial resource. Mrs. Gable waved from her yard as I set up the illuminated sleigh on my front lawn. "Starting early this year, Arthur?" I managed to smile and waved. In return, at least my neighbors didn't expect me to liquidate my assets and move into a facility. The phone began ringing at 2:30. I was untangling the final string of lights when Ethan's ringtone pierced the December air. The same tune he'd had for years, some cheerful song whose name I never bothered to learn. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. I clenched my jaw and continued working. The lights for the front hedges needed testing before I could install them. Half the string was out, likely from being stored in the damp garage. I'd have to search for the box of spare bulbs. The third call came at 2:45. I acted as though I didn't hear it, but my hands were shaking again. What if something was wrong? With the grandkids? Leo had been battling a cough last week. What if Chloe had hurt herself at school? Helen's voice echoed in my mind. Family first, Arthur. Always family first. But Helen had never heard her son call her husband a greedy old fool. The fourth call was at 2:50. I stopped what I was doing, standing in my yard with Christmas lights draped over my arm like garland. My chest was tight, torn between righteous fury and a grandfather's concern. What if something had happened to Leo or the little one? Helen would never forgive me if I ignored a call about the children. Neither would I. I walked slowly towards the front door, each step feeling heavier than the one before. The phone had stopped, but I knew it would start again. Ethan was persistent when he wanted something. As predicted, just as I reached for the doorknob, it rang again. I stood on my own porch, breathing heavily from more than just the manual labor. My hand hovered over the knob. I could let it ring. Let the machine take whatever message Ethan had this time. Continue my quiet morning of decorating and pretend I didn't have a son. But what if it really was about the kids? The ringing sounded louder from inside the house. I went to the kitchen and stared at the phone for 3 more rings before answering. "What do you want, Ethan?" "Dad, I'm so sorry." Ethan's voice came through the receiver, soft and contrite, completely different from yesterday's vitriol. I acted like a complete jerk. Sarah made me call to apologize. I switched the phone to my other ear. Skeptical. The abrupt change in his demeanor raised red flags. Yesterday he had called me a greedy old fool. Today he sounded like a chastened child. "I don't know, son. You said some very hurtful things." "I know. I was horrible to you. Absolutely horrible." His voice cracked slightly, but it felt staged. The holiday stress, the kids wanting things we can't give them. None of it is an excuse for how I spoke to you. I leaned against my kitchen counter, still in my work clothes. Through the window, I could see the half-completed light display on my lawn. The ordinary sight somehow kept me grounded. Stress doesn't make you a different person, Ethan. It reveals who you truly are. Please don't say that. Now he sounded genuinely pained. Dad, I need you to know how truly sorry I am. That's why I'm calling. Sarah and I were up all night talking, and we want you to come for Christmas dinner. Christmas dinner. I rubbed my forehead, with my free hand feeling the tension that had taken up permanent residence there. Christmas Eve, 6, Ethan continued. Please come, Dad. The kids really want to see their grandpa. Chloe keeps asking when you're going to visit. She's been practicing a little play to perform for you. The mention of Chloe struck me right in the chest. 7 years old with a gap-toothed smile, just like her father's had been, always excited to show me her latest drawing or a new move she learned in ballet. Ethan, I just don't know. Leo has been asking about you, too. He wants to show you his new robotics project. Ethan's voice became warmer, more genuine. They miss you, Dad. We all do. I found myself thinking of Christmases past. Helen would be in the kitchen all day, baking her famous brandy-soaked fruitcake from her grandmother's recipe. The house would be filled with the scent of cinnamon and cloves. We'd drive to Ethan's with a car full of presents and homemade treats. I could bring the fruitcake, I heard myself offer. Helen's recipe. That would be wonderful. Ethan's relief was almost tangible. The kids would love that. They're always talking about Grandma Helen's baking. I grabbed a pen and a notepad from the counter. What's your address again? As Ethan recited it, I wrote it down meticulously. And it's at 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve, 6 on the dot. Dad, thank you. This truly means the world to us. Fine. I looked at the address I had written, already second-guessing my decision. But this is your final chance, Ethan. I will not be spoken to like that again. I understand. I promise things will be different. After hanging up, I remained in my kitchen holding the paper with Ethan's address. The numbers looked stark on the white notepad. A destination I wasn't certain I should travel to. Maybe people could change. Maybe the stress really had made him say things he didn't mean. Perhaps. His apology was sincere, and Christmas Eve could mark a new beginning for us. Or maybe I was just a sentimental old man who desperately wanted to believe his son still loved him. I folded the paper and put it in my shirt pocket, right over my heart, where it felt like both a promise and a warning. Saturday morning, December 21st, I sat at my kitchen table looking at Ethan's address on the notepad. Maybe I was too hard on him. Sons can say foolish things when they're under pressure. Helen always said everyone deserved a second chance, especially family. The mall was a chaotic swirl of last-minute holiday shoppers. I circled the parking lot 3 times before finding a space at the far end. Inside the electronics store, fluorescent lights hummed as I navigated the aisles, feeling overwhelmed by the options. For Leo, I chose an advanced model rocket kit, the kind that would challenge a 10-year-old's mind. He had always been good with his hands, just like his grandfather. For Chloe, a digital drawing tablet with a stylus and art software. She had shown me her sketches last summer, intricate drawings of fantastical creatures and castles. The cashier, a college student with weary eyes, offered a tired smile as she scanned the items. Your grandchildren are very lucky to have someone who puts so much thought into their gifts. A wave of pride washed over me. They're good kids. Sunday and Monday were dedicated to the fruitcake. I retrieved Helen's handwritten recipe from the kitchen drawer, where it had lain undisturbed for 3 years. Her meticulous cursive outlined the steps: day 1 for mixing, day 2 for baking, day 3 for serving. At the specialty market, I collected the traditional ingredients: beef sweet from the butcher, crystallized ginger, candied citrus peel, and a bottle of good brandy for aging. The young clerk seemed perplexed when I requested the sweat. Most people just use vegetable shortening now. It's my wife's recipe. Some things shouldn't be modernized. Back in my kitchen, I mixed the heavy batter in Helen's largest bowl, the yellow ceramic one she'd received as a wedding gift. My hands followed her written directions as if they were sacred text. Fold in the flour gently. Do not overmix. Add the brandy last. The kitchen filled with the nostalgic aroma of spices and fruit. Monday was for the long, slow baking process. I wrapped the cake in parchment and placed it in Helen's old roasting pan, the one she'd used every Christmas for 40 years. The scent of baking cake, rich with memories, permeated the house. Christmas Eve morning, I selected my navy suit from the closet. I hadn't worn it since Helen's funeral, but the occasion felt like it required a certain level of formality. The white shirt needed careful ironing, especially the collar, just as Helen had taught me. The gifts were placed in simple brown paper bags, a traditional wrapping that reminded me of my own childhood Christmases. Red ribbon tied around the handles added a festive touch. By 4 p.m., the fruitcake had cooled and was wrapped in fresh cheesecloth on my kitchen counter. I checked my appearance in the hallway mirror, straightening my tie until it was perfect. Helen would have approved. The drive to Ethan's subdivision took 20 minutes, passing streets adorned with extravagant holiday light displays. His house was in a new development of nearly identical Tudor-style homes, each with a manicured lawn and a matching mailbox. The contrast with my own hand-built home was striking. I parked in the driveway behind Ethan's SUV and took my packages from the back seat. Through the large front window, I could see the warm glow of light from within. Silhouettes moved around a brightly lit Christmas tree. The sound of children's laughter reached me through the glass. As I stood on the porch, gifts in hand, I heard Chloe's voice from inside. "Is that Grandpa's car?" My heart lifted, despite my lingering apprehension. Ethan opened the door with a smile wider than I had seen in years. "Dad, you're right on time." He moved aside, welcoming me into the warmth of his home. Before I could say a word, Leo and Chloe rushed from the living room, throwing their arms around my waist in a joint hug. "Grandpa, you made it!" Chloe squeezed me tighter, her gap-toothed smile irresistible. "Of course I did, sweetheart." And I brought presents. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a holiday-themed apron. "Arthur, you look so handsome. Come in, let me take your coat." Her greeting seemed sincere, warmer than our typical exchanges. The house, though not to my taste, was impressive. A towering Christmas tree filled one corner of the living room, adorned with gleaming silver and gold ornaments. The dining room table, visible through a wide archway, was elegantly set with fine china and crystal. "Kids, let Grandpa get settled before you pounce on him for gifts," Ethan chuckled, taking my coat to a nearby closet. I handed out the paper bags, watching their faces illuminate as they discovered their contents. Leo's eyes went wide at the sight of the rocket kit. "Grandpa, this is the exact one I wanted. How did you know?" Chloe hugged her drawing tablet to her chest like a priceless artifact. "Can we set this up tomorrow morning, Grandpa? I want to draw you a picture." "We'll see what your parents say." The sheer joy on their faces began to dissolve my remaining doubts about coming. I presented the fruit cake to Sarah, who accepted it with effusive thanks. "Arthur, you shouldn't have gone to all this trouble. Helen's recipe, isn't it? The children will be so excited." Ethan gave me a brief tour of their newly renovated dining room, pointing out the new wainscoting and built-in hutch. "We did most of the work ourselves," he said, with a pride I recognized from my own building projects. "Good craftsmanship," I conceded. The work was well executed, if not quite up to my own standards. As we sat down at the table, Sarah gestured for me to take the head chair with a flourish. "This is your seat tonight, Arthur, our guest of honor." The formal place settings, fine china, cloth napkins, and crystal glassware reminded me of holidays. With Helen, Ethan carved the roasted ham while Sarah brought in side dishes from the kitchen. The sounds of a normal family gathering filled the room, silverware clinking, Leo describing his robotics project, Chloe humming carols under her breath. "Dad, I truly regret that phone call," Ethan said during the main course, his voice full of genuine remorse. "I was completely out of line. I nodded, sampling the scalloped potatoes. Let's just focus on tonight, on being a family. The meal continued smoothly. The ham was perfectly cooked, the mashed sweet potatoes were creamy and rich, and the green bean casserole tasted just like Helen's. Conversation flowed easily, covering school, work, and holiday plans. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tight knot in my chest start to unravel. This was how Christmas Eve was supposed to be. A family together, sharing a meal and laughter, creating happy memories for the children. Ethan checked his watch a few times, but I chalked it up to coordinating the timing of the meal. Sarah moved back and forth between the kitchen and dining room with practiced efficiency. "Before we have dessert," Ethan announced, getting up from his chair, "I'd like to propose a toast." He went to the sideboard where a pricey bottle of red wine was waiting. "Let's have a drink to family with this wonderful wine." The cork came out with a satisfying pop as Ethan opened the bottle at the sideboard. "This is from that winery in Sonoma we visited last year," he said to Sarah, his voice a bit too loud, a bit too cheerful. "Can we have some too, Daddy?" Chloe asked from her seat beside me. "You and Leo can have sparkling cider instead," Sarah replied, already heading to the kitchen to get it. I watched as Ethan poured the deep red wine into 5 glasses, arranging them meticulously on a silver tray. His movements were precise, almost mechanical, as he placed each glass in a specific position. From my vantage point at the head of the hoary table, I had a clear view of his actions. Ethan glanced around, ensuring everyone was distracted by conversation, before reaching into his suit jacket pocket. A small white paper packet appeared, about the size of an artificial sweetener packet. "What was that? Sweetener?" "No, you don't hide sweetener like that." Ethan's fingers worked quickly, tearing open the packet and tipping a crystalline substance into one particular glass, the glass positioned exactly where my place setting was. He folded the empty packet and slipped it back into his pocket, his, movement swift and surreptitious. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but I maintained a neutral expression, continuing to slice my ham as if I hadn't seen a thing. The food in my mouth suddenly tasted like sawdust. "Ethan, could you help me check on the dessert in the oven?" Sarah called from the kitchen, her timing seeming a little too perfect. "Of course, dear." Ethan set the tray of wine glasses on the table, carefully placing each glass by its intended drinker. "I'll be right back, everyone. Don't start the toast without me." They vanished into the kitchen together, leaving me at the table with Leo and Chloe, who were happily chattering about their Christmas morning wish lists. The drugged wine sat 18 inches from my hand, the glass reflecting the light from the chandelier above. My son, the boy I had taught to use a power saw and change a tire, who had sobbed in my arms after falling off his bike, had just tried to drug me. The realization was more brutal than any physical injury I had ever sustained. Every kind word tonight, every gesture of forgiveness, every moment of what I believed was genuine family connection, it was all a performance. A carefully crafted scene to get me here so they could do what? Kill me for the inheritance? Make it seem like a heart attack brought on by the emotional reunion? The sound of Ethan and Sarah returning from the kitchen jolted me back to the present. My hands had started to shake, but I gripped my cloth napkin to steady them. "Sorry about that," Ethan said, sliding back into his seat with the same strained smile. "The pie needed a couple more minutes." He reached for his wine glass, lifting it toward me expectantly. "Now, Dad, that toast. To family, to new beginnings, and to putting the past behind us." I stared at the poisoned glass, my mind racing. Confront him? Pretend to drink? Call the authorities? What proof did I have besides my own eyes? Ethan's smile faltered slightly as he waited for me to pick up my glass. The room became quiet save for the ticking grandfather clock in the hall and the roaring in my ears. Ethan and Sarah came back from the kitchen, their faces a mask of poorly hidden relief. They resumed their seats as if nothing had occurred, but I saw the quick, meaningful look that passed between them. "All right then," Ethan said, raising his wine glass with a theatrical air. He passed the glasses around the table, placing each one deliberately in front of the person it was meant for. To family and forgiveness. Leo and Chloe lifted their cider, cups with giggles, imitating the adults. Ethan's face was aglow with confidence as he raised his glass toward mine, waiting for me to join him. I lifted my glass slowly, studying his expression. To getting what we deserve. We all drank. Ethan took a deep, triumphant swallow. Sarah sipped nervously, her eyes fixed on me, watching for any immediate reaction. The children drained their cider enthusiastically. I took only the barest sip, just enough to wet my lips. Ethan put his glass down with a self-satisfied smirk, discreetly checking his watch. How long did they think their little plan would take to work? 20 minutes? An hour? I set my glass down with deliberate care and fixed my son with an unwavering stare. "Ethan, what did you put in my wine?" The blood drained from his face. "What? Nothing. I have no idea what you're talking about." His voice cracked, rising in pitch. The dining room fell silent, the only sound the ticking clock in the hall. Leo and Chloe looked back and forth between their parents and me, their expressions filled with confusion. Sarah's face was as white as a sheet, her hand frozen halfway to her glass. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm. "Then I suppose you won't mind that I switched our glasses while you two were in the kitchen." The word struck Ethan like a physical blow. His mouth hung open as the reality of what I had said sank in, his confident facade shattered, replaced by pure, abject terror. "What?" The word was a choked gasp as he leaped to his feet, sending his chair crashing to the floor. His hands flew to his stomach, then his mouth, as if he could somehow undo what he had already ingested. "What's wrong with Daddy?" Chloe's small voice trembled, her eyes filling with tears. Ethan didn't reply. He doubled over, one hand gripping the edge of the table for support, the other clamped over his mouth. His face had turned a sickly shade of green that would have been absurd under any other circumstances. "The bathroom," he croaked, lurching toward the hallway. "I need—" He never finished the sentence. The sound of his heavy footsteps pounding down the hall was followed by the bathroom door slamming with enough force to rattle the pictures on the walls. Then came the sounds of violent retching, desperate and horrible sounds that echoed through the otherwise silent house, punctuated by Ethan's panicked gasps for air. I remained seated at the head of the table and calmly cut another piece of ham, as if this were a normal Christmas dinner. The children were crying now, clinging to one another, while their mother was frozen in a state of shock. Sarah's eyes darted between the hallway, where her husband's agony continued, and my serene demeanor. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it, seemingly unable to form words. Perfect. After 42 years of being Ethan's father, I had finally taught him a lesson he would never, ever forget. Sarah approached me, her hands trembling, her face streaked with tears that may or may not have been real. "You don't understand. We were desperate for the money." Her voice grew shriller with each word, her desperation making her reckless. I put down my fork and looked at her as if she were a complete stranger. "You tried to kill me for my house." From the bathroom, another round of violent sickness erupted, followed by Ethan's weak moans. The sounds made Chloe sob harder, while Leo awkwardly tried to comfort his little sister. "It was just a sleeping drug." Sarah's words tumbled out in a frantic rush. "We just wanted you to change your will. Nothing permanent. We needed you to see how desperate we are." Lies. I rose slowly, my legs feeling perfectly steady. "You gave him enough to make him violently ill. If that was just a sleeping pill, you would have had to crush an entire bottle." Sarah's composure finally broke. "The mortgage payments are killing us. The kids need things we can't give them. You're sitting on a fortune while we barely make it through each month." Ethan's agonized groans from the hallway served as a punctuation to her desperate excuses. "I offered you $12,000, I reminded her, my voice cold. Your husband called me a greedy old fool and hung up on me. That's nothing compared to what you have. Sarah's desperation had morphed into rage, her mask finally gone. You could sell that house and live anywhere. Why should you hoard your wealth while your own grandchildren go without? The children were openly weeping now, huddled together on Leo's chair like refugees in a war zone. They had never witnessed adults behave this way, never seen the ugly truth behind grown-up desperation. I walked to the coat closet and took out my jacket, moving with calm deliberation. I'm leaving, and I am never coming back. Wait! Sarah followed me, her tone shifting between pleading and threats. You can't just abandon them. Think of Leo and Chloe. I turned to face the children, who looked up at me with tear-stained faces, their eyes wide with confusion. I'm sorry you had to see this. The gifts are yours to keep. Leo wiped his nose with his sleeve. Grandpa, why is Daddy so sick? Ask your mother, I said. She has all the answers. I put on my coat and checked for my car keys. Sarah grabbed my arm as I reached for the doorknob. If you leave now, we'll tell everyone what you did. We'll call the police. I looked down at her hand on my arm until she let go. Tell them what? That your husband tried to drug me and accidentally drugged himself instead? That should make for a fascinating report. The bathroom had fallen silent. Either Ethan had passed out or had nothing left to give. Either way, it was no longer my concern. Tell Ethan he made his choice, I said, opening the front door. Actions have consequences. He's just learned that lesson the hard way. I walked to my car and didn't look back. Even when I heard Sarah screaming my name from the porch, I didn't hesitate. The engine started smoothly, reliable as ever, and I drove off into the cold December night. In my rearview mirror, I saw her silhouette in the brightly lit doorway. But I didn't slow down. Some bridges, once they are burned, are best left as ashes. Christmas morning was gray and still in my quiet house. I woke to silence, brewed coffee in my own kitchen, and felt absolutely no remorse about the previous night. Justice, served cold, is remarkably satisfying. The neighborhood was alive with the normal signs of Christmas. Cars filled driveways, the sound of children's laughter carried on the wind, the happy chaos of families opening presents. I watched from my front window, perfectly content in my solitude, with the memory of Helen for company. 3 days later, Mrs. Gable called over the shared fence as I was getting my mail. Arthur, did you hear? Ethan's been in the hospital since Christmas Eve, something awful with his stomach. I composed my features into an expression of appropriate concern. How terrible. Is he going to be all right? Poor Sarah has been there every single day with the children. The doctors don't seem to know what caused it, some kind of severe food poisoning or an allergic reaction. She shook her head in sympathy. You know how these things can happen over the holidays. All that rich food and excitement. Indeed, I said, please give her my best when you speak with her. Mrs. Gable studied my face, perhaps looking for a more dramatic reaction to the news about my son. Will you be going to visit him at the hospital? I'm sure he's in excellent hands with the medical professionals. That evening, I sat in Helen's favorite chair and contemplated Ethan's situation. The boy had received a dose of his own medicine, in the most literal sense. Whatever he had intended for me was clearly more potent than Sarah had claimed. Sleeping pills don't usually land you in the hospital. By December 30th, my mind was made up. The call to my lawyer was brief and to the point. The law office smelled of leather and old paper, just as it should. Mr. Davies had handled Helen's estate and knew me to be a cautious, practical man, not prone to rash decisions. Are you absolutely certain about this, Mr. Sims? He asked, reviewing the new will with a practiced eye. This is a substantial departure from your previous arrangements. A man who tries to poison his own father is not deserving of an inheritance, I stated plainly. The house and my savings will be donated to the Shriners Hospitals for Children. The grandchildren will have trust funds established for them when they turn 25, enough for their education and a start in life, but not enough to encourage idleness. Mr. Davies nodded slowly. And your son and daughter-in-law will receive nothing? Nothing, I confirmed. They have revealed their true character. The signing was a simple but deeply gratifying affair. My signature at the bottom of each page felt like closing a very unfortunate chapter of my life. 2 clerks from the office signed as witnesses, making the document ironclad. January 2nd dawned crisp and clear. I came home from the lawyer's office with a copy of my new will, which I placed in the wall safe where the old one had been. The thick envelope fit neatly into the space where Helen's jewelry box used to be. Looking around my den, I felt a profound sense of peace. The house was truly mine now, not as an asset waiting to be claimed, but as my own sanctuary for the rest of my days. Ethan had taught me a very valuable lesson about the nature of family loyalty, though likely not the one he had intended, Helen's. Photographs smiled at me from the mantel. I raised my coffee cup in a small toast. You would approve, my dear, I whispered. I protected what we built together. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.